My dad drove a truck between Edinburgh and London and tells this story often. He was driving down the motorway and looked to his right, saw a woman with a Miss Trunchbull bun, as he describes it, staring at him with a terrified expression from a car next to him. Before he really knows how to react, the car pulls off at the next exit and my dad, although shaken, carries on. About half an hour later, a different car with a different driver pulls alongside my dad, with the same woman in the passenger seat, with the same expression on her face. My dad thinks hell no and plans to pull into the next services to report, as even if it's nothing or a misunderstanding, better to be safe than sorry, right? Anyway, the car disappears before he can get any details, plates, etc., and he thinks there is no point calling the police with no details, so he carries on driving. About 4 hours later, almost in London, yet another car pulls alongside him with the same woman, same Miss Trunchbull hair, same terrified expression, except this time she appears to be screaming at my dad through the window. So my dad pulls over into a lay-by and calls the police. Apparently, they have received 3 other calls about the same woman and car in the same area in the last few minutes. It is unfortunately anticlimactic, as he never heard anything more about it, but he didn't see her again, and although he kept an eye on the news, didn't see anything about it. Hopefully it's just a giant coincidence. Who knows? Around 2006, I was driving a flatbed. I picked up a load of construction material, drywall, roofing. Don't remember, but it was pre-packaged in boxes, and I remember having to use strap protectors on the load in rural Tennessee. A tarp was required, so I strapped everything down, tarped the load, and left the shipper. About 5 miles down the road, in the middle of nowhere woods on a 2-lane road, I noticed my tarp flapping in the wind. I found a wide shoulder and pulled over to fix it. I realized that I just flat did a bad job tarping this load and decided to redo it on the side of the road. Undo all the bungee straps, drag the tarps off, roll them back up, climb up on the load and start unrolling the tarps again, and then I see a guy walking down the same side of the road I'm on, coming towards my truck. I don't think anything about it other than to keep an eye on him cause I'm in the middle of nowhere, but I continue what I'm doing. About the time, I have tarps set in place and am climbing down to start hooking the bungee straps back on. This dude is getting close enough that I'm now paying more attention to him than I am to tarping my load. I grab my winch bar and set it on the trailer where I'm working just in case. A winch is an 8-pound solid metal bar about 4 feet long, tapered to a blunt point on one end and hollow on the other, used for tightening straps and chains, etc. The guy gets to me and the first thing I notice is his hair. It's like a mullet, but it's super patchy. Like he tried to cut his own hair and had a seizure in the process. The next thing I noticed were his eyes, which I can only describe as off. They were clear. I didn't think he was drunk or high or anything, but it also gave me the distinct impression that the elevator didn't go all the way up. His clothes were dirty and not well maintained, with dirty white tennis shoes. I remember he didn't have laces on one shoe, and the tongue was noticeably out of place. He stops by me, waits until I acknowledge him, and just says, "I've got a long walk." I'm like, "Yeah, man, you do. We're in the middle of nowhere," making it clear there's no ride to be had here. He nods, starts walking by me, continuing on his way, stops at about the driver door on my truck and turns around, comes back to me and repeats himself. "I've got a long walk." At this point, I explained that I can't give him a ride, insurance and all that. Apologize for not being able to help him out, and he seems to accept this, turns around and leaves. I wait for him to get a little ways away from my truck and start working on finishing the tarp job. I still keep an eye on him as he's moving away from me. As I'm putting on the last of the bungee straps, I look over to check where he's at, and he's turned around heading back towards me, now about 100 yards in front of my truck and coming back my way. It looks like he's talking on a cell phone, has his hand up to his face, and I can barely make out his mouth moving, his other hand waving like he's having a conversation with someone. I finish with the straps, grab my winch bar, and am climbing into my truck as he's about 10 yards away now. As soon as I'm in the cab, I lock the doors, and set the winch bar on the passenger seat just in case. I look at the guy and realize he's not talking on a phone. He's talking to his hand, and now I'm nervous. He doesn't look like he's having a nice, pleasant chat. It looks more like an angry conversation. I crank the truck up, put it in gear, and just pull out. Didn't look for traffic or anything. As I pass him, he's just looking at me, still holding his hand to his face with this dead look on his face, just staring at me. It gave me the creeps. About the time I hit 5th or 6th gear, I look in the mirror, and there's no one there. I was driving through eastern Washington on some state roads. There were no rest stops or cities, but I had done the route enough to know there were these massive dirt areas every 40 miles where you could park safely away from the road. I decided to call it a night and closed my blinds and laid down to watch something on my phone. After roughly an hour, I hear someone try to open the driver's side door. I haven't heard any vehicles on the road the whole time I'm parked, but I get up to peek out the curtains. As I'm looking out into the blackness of the driver's side window, I hear them try the passenger side door. I peek down from the top of the curtain, but can't see anything, so I start the truck and kick on the lights. I'm fairly freaked out at this point, so I'm still not opening the curtains, but peeking through gaps. Nothing. Nobody is standing near either of my doors or parked within sight line. I take a deep breath and close the sleeper curtains too, because for some reason that's going to make things better, right? After laying back down and convincing myself that something blew against the truck, and it only sounded like the doors, it was fairly windy outside and a lot of flat ground. I hear what sounds like someone trying to pry open the vents on the sleeper. The door handles start clicking again, and the truck starts shifting like someone is climbing on it. I hit the little alarm button in the sleeper hoping to spook them off, but it does nothing but add to the noise of door handles, fingers tapping on windows and chassis, and the hiss of air coming out of the suspension. Then suddenly it stops. A few moments where I can only hear myself breathing and my heart pounding before I hear another truck approach and then drive by. I spent the next few hours waiting for whatever it was to come back, but it never did. In the morning, I couldn't find any footprints or damage to my truck, but on every window were tiny human-looking handprints, like a toddler had licked their hand and stuck it to my window over and over.